Hello, welcome to our first installment of our movie discussion group. What we're doing today is we're going to talk to somebody who actually understands what it is that we are hopefully going to be looking at. And his name's Tony Myles, and I'm going to let him talk about himself a little bit.
Well, thank you, Neil. My name's Tony Myles, and I spent a little over 20 years working in the film industry, primarily within Florida, but a little bit on the West Coast as well. And I started out in the lighting and grip department. I moved up to camera, then eventually cinematographer and director. And from there, I actually went on to be a college-level educator in film and film production.
Excellent. So what we're doing is we're trying to basically take movies in the same way that people do like book discussion. So we're all going to watch something and then kind of just talk about it amongst ourselves. And what we're hoping to do here today is to get a better idea of what it is that we're looking at. What it is that when I say I like a movie, someone will say why. I could just say, we were talking beforehand about like Fast and Furious. Well, cars go fast. It's fun. But there's more to it, even in something that's, meant to be more entertaining rather than like a deeper movie or something. So what is it that you can tell us about what it is that we're seeing?
Well, the why you like something, I think, is a very important question, because that's asking something of yourself and what you're bringing to it. And you have to analyze yourself along with the movie to determine what it is you like and why you like it. And a lot of people are a little clearer on that when you ask them, like, what's your favorite book or music, something they actually have to put some intellectual effort in and to really properly, I don't want to say properly, that might be a little off, but to understand a film on a deeper or more personal level, you have to put yourself out there. You can't treat it as passive entertainment. You're allowed to look at it and analyze it and tear it apart and find aspects even in your favorite films that you don't like and figure out why you don't like them. So really, the beginning of that process is to watch a movie, not just view it.
Okay. So we were talking beforehand, and I mentioned that there are different types of movies. Like, I really like Lawrence of Arabia.
Mm-hmm. Good pick.
I also like the Fast and Furious movies. They're very different. So maybe like a little bit about like what, I guess, genre is what I'm asking. Yeah. Like what are they? How much of it crosses over? Because, for example, I'm not exactly sure what the Marvel movies are. Like, I don't know what I would define it as. Is it action? Is it science fiction? How much do they cross over?
That's a good jumping off point, I think, the Marvel films, because I think they've effectively created a new genre, that of, the comic book superhero movie. Something Martin Scorsese even very publicly wrote about in a somewhat derisive tone, in that he doesn't really think that they are true cinema, that they're not the cinema he grew up with, which to an extent he has a valid point, but that point is his. And it can't really say, well, this one esteemed filmmaker doesn't like these movies, therefore they are worthless. He's saying that they're not what I grew up with, and I don't appreciate this is the way cinema is going. But the Marvel movies have effectively made themselves a new genre. And it remains to be seen if that's going to just kind of bottleneck to the point of obsolescence in the future. Because, as you said, are they action? Are they drama? Are they what? They're kind of their own thing. And they kind of defy contemporary classification, which is what genre is for. Here we are to break down the essence of the stylistic tone or the way the story is going to be told and what it's telling. Like, in a sci-fi movie, what do you expect to have? Speculative science from a fictional standpoint. And that doesn't necessarily have to be limited by time or era. You could have something set in the past, something steampunkish, which is like a subcategory, I would say, of science fiction in some regard. And you could have just horror, which Americans are accustomed to what they think of horror. You have your masked killer, a bunch of scantily clad teens, and cannon fodder for a knife. But you ask someone in another culture or nationality, what is horror to the Japanese? What is horror to South Korea? What is horror to Britain? They're going to give you different answers and different selections of movies. And it's safe to say that some of those take that genre a lot more seriously than Americans do. And I think the best examples of genre are ones that kind of cross-pollinate with each other. Like going back to Marvel, I think one of the prime examples, even though it's technically outside the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is Logan, which is a superhero movie as a backdrop. You essentially have a road movie Western that happens to have superheroes in it.
Right.
And from that regard, it's like that worked beautifully. And if you'd ask me what my favorite superhero movie was, it'd be very difficult to think of something that tops Logan. Because it's so understated. It's not ultimate stakes, saving the earth or the universe. It's just about people again, and which is yet another genre. You just have your straight drama. Right. Which I think should be the foundation of every movie, maybe outside of experimental film.
Okay. So in making a movie, you're talking about your experiences working in movies and stuff. Who exactly does what? Because director, I think people have a fairly decent image of what a director does. Producer, I'm sure there's more to it than just handing out money, but I think that's what a lot of people think of. The producers are the people who...
And it's not totally wrong from that regard.
Okay.
The producer is they oversee the entire film. They are responsible for picking the script, hiring the director, some of the other key members, but the director, him or herself, is the author of the film. And there are trade agreements in place that give the director this power. A producer is not allowed to supersede that authority. Like, I don't like how the director's doing this, or directing this talent, or the way this set looks. I'm going to come in and push them aside. There are severe monetary penalties and contractual penalties for things like that should they happen. But it's not to say a director can't be fired. A recent example of that is Bohemian Rhapsody, where Bryan Singer was replaced by someone, I can't remember his name, but you can see, if you look for it, you can see the tonal shifts in the movie from these two different directors. And I think the movie actually really succeeded because of that. But were Bryan Singer left in charge of the whole thing, I don't think it would have been as notable of a film. So the producer is the overall person in charge of everything. But as far as the author of the movie, the one who makes the movie, the one who's down there on the ground, directing the troops, the crew, that is the director.
Okay. So then it's also, and I'm not sure the best way to ask, but you have all these other people. Like, how much does a scriptwriter, how much involved are they? How much is a cinematographer? They're all, I guess, under the director.
Correct.
But they're all very specific about what they do, I guess. Or is there more crossover than I'm thinking of?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Each film set is going to operate differently. Okay. Every single one. And if you work freelance in the industry, which is what most people do, they will go from production to production to production. Each one is going to operate differently with different people. And I think the best way to describe the atmosphere or the hierarchy on set is democratic dictatorship. You have the director in charge, and given the temperament or style of the director, he's going to listen or not listen to certain people. But at the end of the day, he can say, I've heard everything you have had to say in regard to how we do this. We're doing it my way.
Okay.
But some directors will not listen to anyone. Some are very hands-off. Some don't like to direct talent. Some leave that to sometimes their first assistant director. Some like to just direct camera. Some want nothing to do with camera. They hate it, even though film is a visual medium. They want to concentrate on the acting.
Right.
So it depends on which film you're on.
Okay.
Yeah, and who you're working with or for.
Okay. So then I guess that kind of leads into how much, and again, this might be one of those where it's a yes or no.
Yeah.
How much does the actor control what they do? Are they very much like, you do it this way, say it exactly this way? Or you hear about every now and then in like interviews, they'll say, well, I freelanced this part.
Yeah.
How much of that does happen? How much of it is?
Again, that's more of it's situationally dependent on the director and the actor. When I've directed talent in the past, I don't like to tell them specifically how to do it because I don't like to think of them as robots. They're bringing something unique to the role. Let them bring it. If you push too much of a directorial style on them, you might push that aside and get a lesser performance. Some directors are extremely strict about how they want it. Someone like David Fincher will do just an enormity of takes of a scene, 70, 80, 90 takes to get that exact thing he wants. Some are a lot looser. If you want to go over to Chinese film for a moment, there's a great director named Wong Kar-wai, and him and his director Chris Doyle, what they do half the time is they'll write the outline of a script, throw the camera on someone's shoulder and say, let's go find our movie. Okay. That's it. It's like you have general direction. This happens in this scene, show it. So you might have 10, 11, 12, 13 takes, each one different, each one with different dialogue, different performances. So you have this, at the end of the day, this gigantic jigsaw puzzle of how are you going to put this together? And so you're kind of making a movie in editing from that regard.
Okay. So I guess it's kind of a lead in, and it's probably going to be similar. In a script, how detailed are the scripts? Like, will it give you, if you read it, would you be seeing, oh, this is exactly what happened in the movie? Or does the director switch that up? How much of it goes from script onto screen?
Thing about a professionally written script, and there are very strict standards of how you write a script as far as margins, dialogue, even font. You write anything aside from 12-point Courier, someone's going to throw that in the garbage. Okay. You give 100 directors the same script, you're going to have 100 different movies. Okay. Because you can't really call it a blueprint for a movie. It's like a strong suggestion for a movie.
All right.
And it really is up to the director to bring that to life. I mean, they're going to hire who they want. They're going to hire their cinematographer, the person that's going to just visually create the film. As far as they're going to control the camera, they're going to control the lighting, they're going to hire a production designer, someone that builds the sets. And they're going to hire their talent, their cast for it. So you're going to have all these different elements that essentially make a different movie. You can even take the same script and approach it the exact same way like Gus Van Sant did with his remake of Psycho, and have a completely different movie. Right. Even though it's like, this looks the same on the script, they're saying the same things, it's shot the same but in color, but it's not the same.
Right. Okay. Let's see. So just taking the different, from what you're saying about scripts and how you can have 100 different movies, just what are there distinct styles that directors carry over? Like Tarantino, for example, you're always going to get, they're very different movies, but they're always a Tarantino movie.
Absolutely.
How much of that is common for because you'll also have other people who you don't even know who the director is. They might have directed 20, 30 things. They're all very different. So how much of it, I'm not even sure how to ask the question, I guess, but just kind of directorial styles and stuff. What?
I think it was more prevalent maybe 15 years ago than it is now. Okay. I mean, you'd have big directors like David Lynch, who, I mean, you know what you're going into when you watch a David Lynch film. I mean, even when you go into something like Lost Highway, it's like, well, you know what you're getting into. Right. You have someone like Hitchcock. You even have someone like Peter Jackson. They have their style. You can feel their hands in the clay, for lack of a better metaphor. But then you have the workman-like directors that go out there this is their job. They have a mortgage to pay and kids to feed. They're going to just slam this out regardless. And honestly, as much as I like George Romero, I think he's a good example of that. He doesn't really have a style. He'll produce a competent film most of the time, but it doesn't feel necessarily like a George Romero film. Okay. And there are other names I can throw out there, but they're just somewhat obscure because they're almost like a background director. Right. they'll produce something and might make a little bit of money, but I mean, like David Fincher is another director with just extreme style, but he genre hops all over the place, but it still kind of feels like a David Fincher film. You go from Seven, you go to like Benjamin Button, or A Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, and he's all over the place. And it's like, this is the guy that did Alien 3?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it depends somewhat on the industry and the people involved, but it seems that recently, in recent times, more and more films are just generated or created to make money.
Okay.
And so you feel less of a style in them. Like the Marvel movies are a decent example because they are all overseen essentially by the same director. So they all kind of have the same, the same producer, not same director. Okay. So they all essentially have the same feel across each title. Okay. Because they're part of a larger cinematic universe. You don't really feel too much of a directorial stamp on them, apart from what Joss Whedon did in the first two Avengers, and I think it was a good decision to eliminate him from that equation. Okay. Because there was too much of him in that instance.
Okay.